The bells of the city were a tired, cracked chorus. Their iron throats complaining into the damp morning. Tyrion Lannister had learned the language of bells as other men learned the languages of birds or sail. The brief, bright chatter of the septs at dawn. The ponderous noon. The grateful dusk. Today the sound seemed to come from deeper within the stones themselves, as if the whole of King's Landing had ribs and lungs and was trying, without success, to draw a full breath. On the balcony of the Tower of the Hand, the air was wet enough to taste. Beneath, the river glided like a dark, indifferent beast, and at the quays the lanterns were pale jellyfish in the fog. He could not see the sea, but he could feel it somewhere beyond. Its pull in the tide and in the city's nerves, the patient pressure of a storm that never quite broke. He took his cup without looking and found wine. Varys had a gift for appearing with cups already in hand, as if he could conjure hospitality the way a hedge witch conjured rabbits. The spymaster stood with his wrists folded as though he wore invisible manacles, his head tilted, his expression as smooth and friendly as milk. "They are at the river mouths," Varys said, almost gently. Signal fires in the distance, fishing boats whispering it in. Lord Stannis makes a deliberate show of order. Davos Seaworth has his van. On a day like this, Tyrion murmured, the mother must have grown bored with prayers. She means to see a spectacle. "We will give her one," Varys said. Tyrion's mouth tasted of iron, as if the bells had been melting in his tongue. "Not we," he said. "Not we this time." Varys's eyes did not move, but the rest of his face rearranged itself around a frown. "Come now. Must we play at surprise?" Tyrion set the cup down. "You know the shape of my mind as neatly as a clerk knows the shape of a page. I have measured every lane and wall in my thoughts. I have kept a tally of men brave enough, of men cowardly enough, of men who are both, which is most men. I have and will not." He took a breath and let it out very slowly. "I will not defend this city." The spymaster did not flinch, did not huff, did not widen his eyes like a maiden. He merely inclined his head. "Shall I ask why?" "Ask? No. You already know. Cersei has countermanded as many orders as I have given, and the ones she has not countermanded she has hollowed with fear. The pyromancers were a tool, not a faith, and your queen has made faith of them. Even now Hallyne smirks, all green-faced and sly as if fire were a clever argument. Joffrey believes a fortress is a stage. The Hound, well, men are not swords, they bend. I have bent, Varys. I have bent until the iron inside me hurt, and still each morning brings some small undoing that no wit can answer. If this city is to be saved, it will not be saved by me. And if it is to fall—" He lifted his hands and left the sentence bare. Varys let the breeze play at his sleeves. "There will be consequences." "There are always consequences," Tyrion said. And for a moment, he felt as if he were sitting again at some long-ago feast, listening to his father speak the same phrase in the same tone, while servants leaned into candlelight to refill goblets. The thought was so unwelcome. He took the wine again and drank until it burned. He looked out toward the river. The fog was lifting, and the black water was revealed in pieces, the way a woman is revealed as her veils are tugged away. Here a shine, then a shiver of ripples, then the stubborn black heart of the channel itself, slow and deep. He could almost pick out the jetties one by one. The old warehouses crouched behind them like worn teeth. The heap of broken hulls where boys fished for iron in the mud. Every board, every stone, every stink felt familiar enough to be a memory. He had expected to feel love for it, the strange, deranged love a man sometimes feels for his prison. But what he felt was fatigue. "What will you do instead?" Varys asked, his voice the careful voice one uses with a man at a ledge. "I will drink," Tyrion said. "I will see to a few matters of my own." He considered phrasing and left it at that. "I will watch. I will not throw myself between this city and Lord Stannis like a rug under a leaky roof, only to be kicked muddy for my trouble." "You will be blamed," Varys said. "Then let them blame me correctly, not as savior and scapegoat both. Let them say I refused." He felt absurdly light. as if he had placed a stone burden on the balcony rail, and watched it fall into the water. The sum of it varies is this: they have made a sport of my efforts. The sport ends no more. I owe them nothing. That is an untrue sentence, Varys said. I owe them nothing, Tyrion repeated. I owe some few in it much. The girl, Varys said, and your squire, and the small folk whose names you don't know, but whose lives you have weighed to the ounce and counted as if they were coins. Ben? Tyrion looked down at his hands and discovered that he was gripping the balcony rail hard enough to blanch the knuckles. He let go. Help me, Varys said softly. If not the crown, then the realm. The realm, Tyrion said, and laughed without humor. A lovely fiction. A groom to which all who would not marry each other pledged their troth. When Stannis takes the city, if he takes it, he will shave the realm to his taste and serve it on hard bread. When Joffrey holds the city, if he holds it, he bites the realm to see if it squeals. The realm is a sheep flayed in different styles for each cook. Forgive a butcher's son if I prefer my own kitchen. And now all. Then you mean to flee, Varys said. Tyrion thought of the iron door behind the hearth that Varys pretended not to possess, and of dark stairs that smelled of mold and rat and lost time. He thought of the taste of the sea on nights he had stood at the quays, and imagined ships without masters. He thought of a room in the Kettle Black where a woman laughed, as if laughter were a ladder she could fling down for him to climb. No, he said. Not yet. Then what? I will visit the Sept, Tyrion said, surprising himself. Isn't that what men do when they have decided to leave their courage to other men? They visit gods and beg them to forgive the shape of their courage. Now. Varys said nothing, and in his silence, Tyrion heard the city exhale. Carts creaking, a horse blowing damp from its nostrils, the sound of 1,000 doors closing a little faster than yesterday, in the face of news that traveled only half in words and half in the set of people's shoulders. He found Podrick on the stair landing, clutching a helmet whose visor would never fit the boy's face. Pod was pale and stiff, so earnest he looked carved. Tyrion had to smile at him. We are changing the day's plans, Tyrion said, and explained them. Podrick did not understand. Podrick always understood slowly but faithfully. As if understanding were a heavy object he had been entrusted to carry carefully over uneven ground. Tyrion put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Do as I say, please. Sir, Podrick said and swallowed. And Lord, I mean. Sir, Lord, either will do. If you cannot find Bronn, find no one. If you can find Cess, if you can find the lady, tell her I have asked for her prayers. Then keep to the keep. Don't play the hero. Monsieur. Yes, my lord. And Podrick. Yes? Thank you. The boy blinked in confusion until Tyrion stepped past and was gone. He took a litter as far as the foot of Visenya's hill, and then went afoot among the market stalls. It was early enough that the fishmongers were only beginning to lose their morning patience and begin the early afternoon rage. The smells here were the city itself. Salt, rotted wood, soaking sacks of barley, frying onions, piss, tar, smoke, old wool. The fog had gathered in the hollows of the streets like a harmless army. Above, the sept rose from it like faith inventing itself from steam. Inside, the mother's statues were covered in votives. Wax had dripped and cooled in hoops and loops and little thrones around the saints' feet, so that it looked as if the stone gods were seated in frozen rivers of melted need. He stood for a time in the back where beggars stood, then shuffled forward to where the merchants stood, and at last made a place among the seats where no one quite knew if they were for nobles, or for anyone who had the boldness to sit. It was quiet. Tyrion realized with a small shock that it had been a long time since he had permitted quiet into him. Cersei with her iron scorn had filled him. Joffrey with his sharpness had prickled him. The logistics of food and men had rattled him. Now the quiet arrived like something with weight at last. Something that could be held. He prayed, though he would not have used that word if asked. He told the mother he had done much and enough, and would not do more. He told the father that judgment was too easy a thing for men who did not have to live in the ruins of it. He told the crone that he did not claim to see any lantern light. He told the smith that he had worked already, and was not a mule for the work of men who could not hammer their own luck. He told the warrior that courage was a wife he could not keep discovering himself unexpectedly married to. He told the maiden he was no suitor for her, for all his jokes. He told the stranger he would meet him in alleys and in cups. Later, if the stranger would be so kind as to go about his own errands now. He had never believed that gods answered, and yet he found himself waiting, as if the sept itself might tilt and pour some reply from its vast dome. The only reply was the pad of soft shoes. A girl had come in alone, hands clasped, hair veiled in gray. Sansa Stark. She moved like a painted prayer come loose. She did not see him as she knelt. He had expected to see fear in her, useless and flapping as laundry. Instead he saw, not peace, nothing so grand, but some smaller cousin of it that clung to her like the smell of rosemary when a kitchen has been well scrubbed. He left her to it. Outside, a troop of boys passed in mismatched armor, their heads full of their own tallness. One of them shouted something obscene at a passing woman, and then looked back in terror, as if his own mouth had betrayed his parentage. It was not yet noon, and the day had already begun behaving as if it would not have enough hours to hold all it intended. By the time Tyrion returned to the Tower of the Hand, the fog had gone from the water, and the river lay plain as a scar. The first of Stannis' banners were visible in the distance, ragged, stubborn flecks marching along the road's long vein toward the city. On the water, the shapes of ships thickened like rain gathering on the edge of a slate roof. Men were shouting. Orders were being given. Orders were being ignored. In the Queen's holdfast, Cersei paced in a dress that had the look of armor, though it made her throat more naked. Lancel hovered at the threshold, pale, thinning, in pain that he tried hard to wear as finery. On a table near the window, a pitcher of red sat like a threat. The Queen's women stood as if their feet had grown into the flagstones. "Where is he?" Cersei asked for the fourth time. She meant Tyrion. No one had the courage to tell her that the question now bore the dignity of a prayer. Something said regardless of answer. "He was in the sept," said a small voice. Sansa had returned, summoned by the Queen's guard. Cersei turned toward her sharply, then smiled as one smiles at a child. One has decided to lead carefully into a trap. "How pious," Cersei said. "We will need your songs later, little dove. Do you know the one about the drowned maid? The one whose hair was kelp and whose eyes were pearls? No. You will learn." She poured wine and drank half of it, as if she were measuring both herself and the day. "Send for Hallyne." The pyromancer came wringing his hands and smiling, which seemed an accomplishment in its way. He always looked as if he had discovered a clever child under a floorboard, one who spoke only to him and promised mischief on command. "Your Grace," he said, "the jars have been placed as you requested." "Good," Cersei said. "If the water takes them, will the water quench it? Truly?" She had asked this before. She asked it again. She liked answers to hold still. "Say it again to me." "It will burn on water as on wood," Hallyne said, delighted as a minstrel at a refrain. "It will burn on water as on stone, as on flesh. It will cling. The gods' good green. It will not fail you." "We shall see whose gods have the better taste in colors," Cersei murmured. "Tell the red cloaks to leave room at the quays for the trick of it." "No, not there, there." She pointed at a map as if the map itself would obey. It was a trick, not a plan. It was a moment's gleeful cruelty, writ large, and called strategy, because no one dared call it by its smaller name. Gentle flame does not kill an army. Flame used cleverly might, but cleverness had been sent to a seat in the back of the house and told to mind its hands. Down by the mud gate, Sandor Clegane's horse fretted. He put a hand to the animal's neck and felt the nervous sweat darken the hair. The hound's face was a map of old fire. Those who feared the sight of it were small and easy. It was what lives under fire that he feared, and he hated that knowledge with the same wordless, dutiful rage with which he pounded dents out of his helm. "Stand there," he barked to a boy who could not have put hair on his lip with a brush, and the boy nodded and stood where he had been standing a moment before. "If I see you shift," Sandor said, I'll nail your boots through the boards." The boy swallowed. Sandor spat. He could smell the river. He always could, even when he tried to smell anything else. He could smell tar and wet rope, and cooked oysters from some fool selling them hot at a moment like this. He could smell the whiff of pitch in the jars the pyromancers had taken down to the shore. And he could smell, underneath, the remembered smell that lived in him, like something rotten sealed inside a closet. He told himself again that fire was a tool like any other, and that men afraid of tools were wives. He told himself that, and watched his hands tremble, and thought of his brother laughing. The sound a rock makes when another rock is struck against it. Out on the water, Davos Seaworth stood in the belly of his ship with the quiet he had stolen from 100 bad nights wrapped around him like a cloak. The fog had been a mercy, but it receded. And mercy receding looks much like it does when a creditor comes to a door, hat in hand and eyes apologetic. The black water ahead lay slick. He had his sons in sight. Allard with his jaw already set against disappointment. Dale murmuring encouragement with his hand at the tiller. Young Mathos pretending not to watch him for a sign. Davos did not give signs. He gave orders, and let them be mistaken as signs by men who needed them. "Steady," he said, because it was always the right thing to say. The fleet moved at the pace of a thought one does not want to have. The mouth of the river narrowed. King's Landing was a bruise that had swelled into towers. Davos knew he should be thinking of many things. Tides, the darting weaknesses of the current, the way defenders would stand aside for more obvious places to strike from less. Instead, he was thinking of onions, of how relief arrives most often wrapped in something with a smell, and how men hate that smell and love it all at once. They had expected some devilry. Davos had learned the taste of Lannister devilries. He saw no heavy chain bulking the water. He saw no careful work of a mind that could save men by killing them cleverly. He saw only the bustle of ill-prepared defense, and closer in, the faint unnatural green that lived in the river like secret weed. Wildfire, he said, not to frighten his sons, but to put a name to a name that might otherwise masquerade as fear. They will throw it. They'll burn themselves first, Allard said grimly. If they're lucky, Davos said. The shout carried down the line. Sails dipped. Oars bit. On the walls, men peered and pointed. There was no Tyrion Lannister among them with a plan heavy enough to anchor them. There was only a boy king who had come to preen for the city, and was already being pulled back by a cousin with blood seeping under his breastplate. And there were captains who knew their numbers and despised them. And there were sellswords whose courage could be counted at so many dragons ahead and slowed accordingly. The gold cloaks muttered among themselves, half of them loyal to the paymaster, half loyal to their own noses, which smelled the wind and did not like it. Tyrion stood again at the balcony and watched war begin in a disorganized way, the way squalor begins. A flight of arrows loosed too short. A cheer ripped from someone whose voice broke in the middle of it. The first jar of wildfire thrown too early, bursting in a spray of emerald that burned with a hiss that seemed to come from inside men's ears. Another jar dropped from frightened fingers and clattered on the stone, and men leapt back as one of their fellows, bold or stunned, rolled it away with the bottom of his glove like a drunken juggler. It did not split. It rolled like a headache. There was laughter then, raw and high. It was the kind of laughter that harbors a sob within it and cannot decide which it longs to be. At the mudgate, Sandor saw the green and felt his body answer it before his mind could. The bite of old heat rushed up his arms as if his veins were pipes carrying hot water from a boiler he had thought gone cold. He heard a man scream as if a keg had exploded inside his chest, and he smelled pork that was not pork, and he took 2 steps back because his legs had made them, and then someone jostled him, and he had his sword out and did not remember unsheathing it. "Hold," a voice cried. It might have been his own. He could not tell one roar from another. The first green on the water took like gossip. A thrown jar burst against a ship's beak and ran down its sides, licking, seeking, finding fat. Davos' fleet hesitated as one organism does when it discovers something cold in a warm bed. Another jar went wide and sizzled out on the wet boards of the quay, leaving smoking splinters. A third hit the river and did not go out. The color. It was the sin of color. the way a child draws fire if told to make it marvelous. "Back water," Davos shouted. "Back. Back." The oars dug with a frantic unity he had seen only twice before, in tempests and in panics. The wind shifted and brought the smell to them. He heard Mathos cough and mutter a prayer that belonged to no god Davos knew. The Queen's trick was a trick. It was not the Caja River plan that another mind might have made of it. Ships burned, yes, and men burned, and the river took green scars that floated and spread and drifted to cling where they could. Some of Stannis' captains fell back too swiftly. Others pressed forward, their desire to prove their bravery to the king outstripping any desire they had to live. It made for a battle that tried to be a spectacle and became a confusion. The chain did not rise from the water to trap the fleet like a seam ripping. Torches did not bloom in sequence like flowers in a clever garden. There was only the chaos that even victories carry in their pockets like small, stabbing knives. Joffrey stamped and shouted at the walls until Lancel Lannister, jaw tight and eyes fevered, begged him to come back to the Red Keep. This scene repeated itself with the inexorability of a play that has not been well written. The boy king raging, the cousin bending, the boy king raging again. Then at last the petulant retreat which made the gold cloaks, watching, slouch with a different sort of fatigue. In Maegor's holdfast, Sansa watched the queen pour more wine and speak, almost politely, of the things she would do if the walls fell. There is a comfort in having a plan. Cersei said, though the word comfort sounded dangerous on her tongue. She stroked Tommen's soft hair as she said it, having sent the child away, and then called him back again, and then sent him away once more. A woman without a plan is a woman with only what men give her. You must never be such a woman. Sansa, who wished to be the kind of girl whose prayers came true like winter mornings, bowed her head. Yes, your grace. Sing to us later, Cersei said, almost kindly. Sing to me now if you like. Sansa's mind supplied a song about brave lords and sweet girls and good, clean snow. Her mouth did not. She had no voice at the moment. Instead, she found herself thinking of the Sept's cool stone, and of the way, for all his jokes and his wicked mouth, Lord Tyrion had stood there, very small, very still. She had thought, when she first came south, that the world would be full of men who bent circumstances, the way a woman's maid bends a comb's teeth back into alignment, one by one. It was a slow, painful surrender of a thought to learn that men often bent and broke instead. The hours tore themselves into ragged lengths. Ships drifted burning on the river like the city's thoughts about itself. Men ran in lanes where they had once strolled proudly. The pyromancers exhausted their jars at the quays, and then smiled as if their work had been music. Stannis men landed in places that were not meant for landing and found, to their admiration, that the river cared less for men's intentions than men imagine. And always there was the sense, pulsing in the streets and in the holdfast alike, that something, some certain hand at the center of the web, was missing, and that all smaller hands were waving in its absence. Tyrion watched, and felt the watching as a sin. Twice he lifted his hand as if to signal some runner. Twice he let it fall. Once he sent a note, and then sent, on the heels of it, a runner to retrieve the note before it could be opened. He drank. The wine, too, watched him. It had learned his mouth too well. Podrick returned before dusk with eyes too big for his skull. Lord, he said, breathless. Yes. I found Sir Bronn at the hook. He said it's not his fight if no one pays him to make it so. He said. Podrick swallowed the rest and began again in that stubborn way of his. He says he will do what he can with what he has where he is, if it does not cost him more than his life. That, Tyrion said, is a very reasonable arrangement. And the lady? I could not. Her maid said she was with the queen. Of course she is. Tyrion took in the boy's rigid posture, the way he stood as if standing were a task he might fail at if he did not concentrate. Ayat. Sit it, if you can. When the bells change, go no farther than the next room from me. Menau. Podrick nodded, then did a peculiar little bow that seemed to be a promise to behave. By late afternoon, the green fork of flame on the river had become rarer, but more terrible. The jars fewer, the throws more desperate, the results more often men shrieking in such a way that even those who hated them swallowed and fell quiet. Davos Lead had suffered, then gathered, then suffered again. Stannis himself landed, as all men who had learned to trust only their own work always did. He swung an axe with a miser's efficiency. Each blow was a sentence. His gaunt face drew itself in, as if withholding expression would leave more strength for the blade. They took the Mudgate. Not all at once, and not in the way skalds love to sing about gates being taken. With a trumpet of inevitability. They took it the way rot takes wood. Push, retreat, wait for some subtle weakening that no one can see with the eye. Then push again, and find the softness where hardness used to be. They set a banner on the wall that made men inside the city whisper names as if the names were spells. The gold cloaks there folded. The sellswords there tried bargaining in languages men do not speak in combat. The boys there fled and discovered how narrow streets can be when fear tries to squeeze a city through a needle's eye. The hound disappeared. He did not run exactly, because nothing so large runs without becoming ridiculous. He went away in a series of heavy final decisions of the body, each step a refusal. Somewhere a poor man shouted about traitors, and was knocked down by two men who used to stand near him at the tavern and share bread. Somewhere a woman lost a shoe, and then lost another thing, and never bent to pick up the shoe. Lights bloomed on the hills beyond the city at dusk. For a moment it was an innocent thing, torches in the hands of men making camp. For a moment, a city might believe it would be relieved, as it had been relieved before, that a lord's voice would sound from the northern road, and everything dirty and shameful would scuttle back under the planks. Men leaned forward at the walls as if their bodies could pull the lights closer. Tywin Lannister did indeed march, and with him, the roses. But dusk is a poor hour for salvation. The sun is tired, and even victory has to squint. And there is a wide difference between relieving a beleaguered city and riding triumphantly into a city where the door has already been opened from the inside. Tyrion understood this without letting any of his emotion notice it. He watched the lights resolve into lines, and the lines into men, and the men into heraldry. He watched the river go black, and then green again in streaks, and then black. He heard the bells in their new rhythm, a stuttering of warning, a dreary insistence of demand. He thought of his father's hands and the way they could make silence so loud at a table full of men that one had to drink just to keep from shivering. He went to the holdfast. The hall smelled of wax and rich sweat, and the old perfume that is always leftover power. The queen sat with a cup at her mouth and the boy at her knee. When Tyrion was announced, her laughter cut the air as cleanly as a blade cuts bread. "Our savior arrives," she said lightly. "Your grace," Tyrion said, and bowed in a way that flattered the bow more than the queen. He saw Sansa standing behind a cluster of ladies, and she lifted her eyes briefly before putting them down wherever she put her thoughts, when she did not want them touched. He saw, with a flicker of surprise, Sir Mandon Moore standing unmoved in a shadow, his calm as disturbing as it always was. "Have you come to command men?" Cersei asked. "Or only to watch them die from a better vantage?" "I have come to advise prudence," Tyrion said. "Prudence?" Cersei's smile widened. "From you?" "You have spent our jars," Tyrion said, ignoring her. "You have spent the courage of your captains with displays that did not hold. The Mudgate is gone for now. Stannis is inside. If you would keep what remains, if you would keep, at the very least, your son, you will gather your women and what guards remain to you and retreat to the castle's last heart. You will move water. You will move bread. You will close the inner doors. You will not pour courage into the river in one cupfuls more. If the saviors beyond the hills reach us, they will reach a place still worth reaching. If they do not, then you will have the comfort of having done all you could to keep breath in your child." "No," Cersei sipped. "And where will you be while I'm doing all of these noble, sensible, dreary things?" "Wherever cowardice is most useful," Tyrion said. "It is a flexible tool." "Oh, you confess it? How obliging." She leaned forward, and for an instant, he saw something like fear cross her face. Not the fear of death, which she wore like jewelry at the moment, but the fear of humiliation, which she always wore as skin. Your refusal today will be remembered. Undoubtedly, Tyrion said. Let it be remembered by the living, not judged by the dead. She waved a hand as if fanning a pet. Go and be useful then, in that ridiculous way you have. Girl, she said, turning to Sansa, sing? Sansa. Daktawa. Tyrion stood and listened, and felt the peculiar, exact pleasure of recognizing a precise note, held very purely by a voice that has decided to be brave. The words were some old praise of knights. The tune was the tune. One sings to doors to persuade them to open. The lady's eyes shone, which is not the same as weeping but related to it. When the song ended, the queen poured herself more wine, as if it were blood she had bled for. Again, she said. Tyrion slipped away. He knew the doors under the doors now. Varys had ensured he did. He knew how to follow the artery of the keep down to its thinnest veins. He left the clamor as a man leaves a warm bath. Unwilling, sure that what follows will be cold, doing it anyway. He took a torch and took no companion. He told himself he was going to see about a gate that could be closed more tightly, about a cook's stair that might carry too easily, about a postern that should not be opened. He told himself that, and when he reached a landing he almost turned aside to the room. He knew by shape and scent, and the particular hunger that lives in it like an animal. He passed it. He kept going until the torch burnt his hand through its heat-slick and sweat-slick shaft, and he had to change hands and realized his left was trembling. Oh, do stop, he told it. It trembled anyway. Outside again, the city had a different sound. When fear changes color, it changes pitch. Somewhere, in an alley that had never been properly named, someone wailed the word mother without either question or exclamation, as a statement that no one would take down. Somewhere a man with a lute tried to start a brave tune and could not bite the first note into shape. Somewhere men from the Stormlands shouted their lord's name as if each were trying to keep the syllables from falling from his mouth and shattering entirely. At the Mudgate, Stannis' standard between the two crowned stags twisted in the river wind, as if the cloth itself disapproved of the way it had been brought here. Men in the King's Red moved with the efficient reluctance of carpenters, repairing not a roof but a reputation. Stannis himself stood like a stake bent into the ground. His silence was a thing men worked around. Onward, he said at last. And when he said it, the word did the work of 10 men. They pressed into the city. A section of wall not designed to be defended from within became the center of a defense anyway. A young officer who had grown up polishing the notion of his own bravery in mirrors fell with a look of surprise as if someone had shown him his face had always belonged to someone else. A pot of oil toppled and made fire that remembered other fires and told them how to live. It leapt a lane and ate a balcony. A mother threw a blanket over a child and looked as if she had done something useful even before the blanket caught. Tyrion found Bronn after all, because the day liked nothing better at that point than undermining his words. The sellsword had a strip of cloth tied around his upper arm, and a grin that had too many projects in it. Changing your mind? Bronn asked cheerfully, flicking blood from his sword and watching where it landed as if blood were a messenger arranging appointments. I am using it differently, Tyrion said. Come with me. Where to? Where the city leaks most. What? Everywhere. But Bronn came, because some men will always come when the day is interesting enough. They moved through streets that the battle had not quite reached yet, the way a disease moves through a body, and then has the indecency to pause at a healthy organ in its tour. Tyrion cried to a group of gold cloaks to hold a turn and then watched them fail to understand the geometry of courage in that particular corner. Never mind, he muttered. We will plug the hole somewhere else. He found a stair that led to a walkway behind a section of wall that in better days had functioned as a place to lean and look at the river and speak of matters that did not require a table. Now it was a way to approach the back of a knot of men who had fused into a ball by their own terror. Break them or be broken, Bronn said, and broke them. Tyrion stood above the tangle and shouted things he knew from reading histories. It was surprising how often men would attend to a voice that sounded as if it knew what it was doing, even when they could not see the face attached to the voice, or when the face they did see was the wrong face, small and laughable. "Left," he cried. "Hold your left. Leave a gap. Now take it back." It had the effect that throwing a few coins at rioters sometimes has. Some impulse more ancient than argument asserts itself. The ragged edge of men stiffened. They pushed. They shouted, now in a somewhat less high, somewhat more useful way. It was not a defense worthy of a song. It was not even an arrangement of bricks worthy of a mason's pride. It was enough to make Stannis' men adjust, which is sometimes, on a day like this, a victory. Night came reluctantly, like a guest who knows that arrival commits one to conversation. Its darkness was not complete. The fires that had started earlier multiplied and contradicted one another, so that some streets had the glow of a rural vigil, and others the wicked leaping shadows of a feast that has gone wrong. The Red Keep held, because that is what the Red Keep was good at doing, as if the stones themselves had been taught stubbornness by a tutor who thwacked them when they faltered. In the holdfast, Cersei had dismissed the ladies. Sansa stayed because she had not been told to go. Tommen dozed with his mouth open like a question no one dares answer. Cersei held a small vial between two fingers and watched the way the candlelight made its contents reply. "When I was a girl," she said to Sansa, "I believed the city would make me large. A dress does that in a mirror. A city does not. It makes you very small and it expects you to like it." Sansa said because she had learned, "You are not small, Your Grace." "I am whatever a man is looking at," Cersei said. She set the vial down and smiled at her own thought, rather than at Sansa Tai. "But I do not allow them to look at me when I do not wish it. Do you understand?" "No," Sansa said. It was honest and made her feel better. Cersei laughed. The laugh was briefly younger. "Keep that. There is a strength in knowing when you do not know. It frightens people used to pretending." A knock came as if the knocker knew that knocking on a queen's door at such an hour is a declaration one cannot take back. Lancel spoke through the wood because opening it took time he did not have. "Your Grace," he said. "They are inside the wards. There is fighting at the Queen's Gate. Lord Tywin is on the river road. The Tyrells. Bring me my son's sword," Cersei said, almost indifferently. "Go, fool. Fall down somewhere else." He went. After a while, Tyrion came instead. They looked at each other as people do in courts, when both have dressed with care, and then been pushed into mud. "They are within," he said, "but they do not yet have what they came for. Tywin is near. He will not arrive in time to prevent a great deal of ugliness. He will arrive in time to claim that he did. And you? I have kept a few corridors from collapsing. I have sent a few men where their dying will matter. I have refused to be their savior, and yet discovered that refusal does not mean escape from responsibility. It appears the gods are great ironists. Perhaps they were smiths first. Then?" Cersei touched the vial with her little finger. She did not lift it. "Do you love this city?" "I am weary of it," Tyrion said. "That is not an answer." "It is the truest answer." He hesitated. This next was the thing he had told himself he would not care enough to say. He spoke it anyway. "If Stannis takes the keep, do not waste your life on making a point. Let the man have his point, he has so few pleasures. Save the boy." Cersei looked at him in a way that for a moment made him see the girl she had been, and the woman she had decided, 100 times, to be instead. "You cannot bear the thought of me martyred," she said lightly. "What a tender brother." He did not answer. He did not have tenderness to spare for sarcasm. "Go, do something clever," she said at last. "Or go drink yourself senseless. Your little decisions have always been more interesting than men's grand ones. If I must be saved at last by something small, it should at least amuse me." He laughed despite himself. "I will do my best to be amusing." He found Varys by following the route that seemed least likely to hold him. The eunuch stood at the window of a narrow stair looking down, where torches made a crooked path that might be an army, or a procession, or a funeral, depending on where one stood and what one hoped for. "The roses have broken into bloom," Varys said. "Do you smell them?" "I smell blood," Tyrion said. They often ride together. Varys turned, hands folded again, which made his whole body look like a question. Well, I refused to defend the city, Tyrion said. And then I did, in small places, where men were falling through the floor. Very like you, Varys murmured, approving as a tutor who discovers a student cheating but with style. Will Tywin reach us in time? In time for what? Varys asked. For him? Always. Tyrion leaned his head against the cool stone and laughed, because some things hurt in a way that transforms pain into hilarity. When the books are written, they will leave me out. Only in the bad ones, Varys said. And the good ones will be read by no one. Almost no one, Varys said. I will read them. He paused, and the pause made a small noise like a bird hovering just out of sight. And the girl might, if she lives. If she lives, Tyrion repeated. He closed his eyes, and through the lid saw a city made of red and black and green and smoke, and the pale, stubborn light of men's foolishness, which looks so like their courage. He opened them and found the stair still there. The night is not finished. It rarely is, Varys said. The night went on in the tedious, terrible way of nights, in which history pretends to be a story, and is in fact a long series of practicalities. Somewhere a gate was bartered for, and then rebarred, by a different set of hands. Somewhere, the same man died twice in rumor, and once in truth, and the two deaths did not agree about timing. Somewhere the hound drank himself into something like solitude, and then out of it again. Somewhere Davos' sons counted each other and came up wrong. Somewhere Stannis, standing under a portcullis that had learned to be nervous, measured a path through the Red Keep that he could not see, and walked it nevertheless because he only ever walked in straight lines. Tyrion moved where moving seemed to matter. He stood where standing seemed to carry weight. He lied to men who would be braver if they believed the lie. He told the truth to men who would be careful if they heard it. He became, in those hours he had tried not to be, a center of small efficiency. It shamed him enough that it freed him. There is a relief in doing what you know you can do, even when you have decided in noble despair not to. At last. No, not at last. Because nothing was decided. Nothing ends cleanly in a city that has learned how to survive its own disasters. At last, for that portion of the night, there came a swelling from the northern road that had joy in it. The joy was ugly and proud. It was the joy of men who had arrived late to a feast, and intended to eat as if they were starving. The roses were in bloom indeed, and Tywin rode among them like a gardener looking forward to a harvest. He brought with him the sort of order that lacks hesitation because it does not bother with thought. It is an order men recognize because they have seen it imposed on them from above all their lives. The order of a table where the host carves whatever portion pleases him. Stannis' men, inside the wards, found themselves in an indecent position. The door before them not yet entirely opened. Behind them, a new drumbeat. Their discipline held beautifully until it did not. Then it held again because men near Stannis hold if they do not wish to be seen. In the streets where wildfire had licked, men of 3 different lords slipped on the same soot, and cursed in 3 different accents, and struck each other with the same swords. The air, which had smelled earlier of river and pitch and fear, now smelled of horse and arrogance. Tyrion stood once more on his balcony and watched the first pink of dawn announce itself, as if announcing were enough to make the day true. He ached. The ache was articulate. It could have named all its reasons and told their stories if asked. He thought of his refusal and of all its ways of failing to hold. He thought of his father's face when he would hear that his son had not seized the day with both hands, and bled it until it cried for quarter, and then called that mercy. He thought of the small folk and whether any of them would even later be capable of telling the story of last night in a way that would make anyone else believe them. Podrick slumped beside him like a dropped sack. "Is it over?" the boy asked. "Nothing is ever over," Tyrion said. "Some things are simply not happening at the moment." Podrick nodded as if this somehow untangled something in him. He fell asleep upright, head lolling, a smear of ash on his cheek, making him look like a boy who had played and fallen in a garden. Tyrion set a hand on the boy's shoulder and let it rest there, as if that might teach his own hand how to be quiet. Below, trumpets answered trumpets in the wrong keys. The Red Keep held. The city had not been sacked. It had been gnawed. It would live. It would remember. It would lie to itself about how it had survived and whom it owed. He saw Varys in the court below and lifted his hand. Varys lifted one in return, a small, almost merry acknowledgement, as if the two of them were children too clever to be allowed to sit beside each other at supper, and had found a way to communicate despite their elders. Cersei would already be rewriting the night in her mind. Joffrey would already be finding the precise angle at which to stand, so that the morning's light made him look less like panic and more like triumph. Tywin would already be detaching gratitude like a burr from his cloak. Stannis would be scowling into his disappointment and discovering that he could make a virtue of that too by calling it righteousness. Davos would be counting what he had left and making the number into a prayer. Tyrion poured out the last of the wine and watched its arc. "I did not defend the city," he said to no one, and heard how true and untrue it sounded. He thought of Sansa singing to other women so that their hands had something to do with their fear, and of Bronn whistling cheerfully as he slit a throat like a seam and patted it closed, and of Podrick's earnest attempt to occupy a helmet that would not have him. He thought of a chain that never rose and a fire that did. When the sun's first arm found the river and drew a glint from it, showing where the green had sunk to the mud, Tyrion turned and went inside. He had work to do that was not defense and not, entirely, surrender. The work of arranging the story so that it could be told, of paying the men who would keep the wrong doors shut, of counting what had been lost in a ledger that would never be shown to anyone and learning to live with that, as he had learned to live with everything else. He found on his table a scrap of parchment on which someone, Podrick, poor misguided boy, had written a list of streets near the mud gate where he thought barricades would be useful. Tyrion smiled and kept the list. There is a peculiar comfort in knowing that at least one person has mistaken you for a certain kind of man. It makes you more able, sometimes, to be another kind. Outside, the bells changed. Their tone was different already, as if the iron remembered something new about itself. The city shifted on its foundations and made a sound like a giant turning in its sleep. Tyrion Lannister went to meet the day and his father and the Mayor of Lies, that is every morning, his refusal tucked neatly beside his reluctance and his knowledge, which, like the best knives, refused to rust no matter what was asked of it. We. Dawn arrived with the exhausted air of a messenger who had run too far in bad shoes. It came in thin strips between the towers, in a pale combing of light over rooftops, slicked with ash and dew, and in the river's reluctant glitter, which showed where the green had sunk into the mud like sin learning to be sediment. On the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion Lannister stood with a cup that had forgotten how to soften his mouth, and watched the city make its small practical adjustments to the fact of being alive. He had not slept. The body, resentful, had taken its revenge by filling his limbs with the slow ache of a bell's aftertone. The bells themselves were quiet for the moment. That silence felt not like peace, but like a breath held while someone searches a room for a lost thing. Podrick had toppled into sleep on a bench and slid sideways like a sack of oats. A smear of soot on his cheek gave him a boy's war paint. Tyrion laid a cloak over him, and this felt like a victory, being something done entirely and correctly, with no politics attached. Below, men with red stags on their surcoats were being pushed back down lanes they had climbed in the dark. The roses had come. The antlered lions had arrived with their gardener. It was an ugly, clean kind of work that remained. Routing, reclaiming, making the streets speak Lannister again. There is a plainness to the final hours of such nights, as if history tires of its own drama and leaves the stagehands to sort the props. There was a knock. A cautious one, as if whoever knocked suspected the door of harboring tempers. Tyrion pulled it open and found Varys standing with a look of mild sorrow that always sat on him like a well-chosen ring. "Your father has entered the city," Varys said. He made certain to be seen entering it. "On a horse," Tyrion said, and tasted iron that might have been bitterness. Into the throne room, if the paving stones could bear his impatience. "They bore it," Varys said softly. "They always have. And Stannis? In retreat where he can, in ruin where he cannot. Many of his men will find prayer in the river. The rest will make their prayers to the man himself, who is a jealous god. And Davos? A flicker. The Onion Knight is as hard to peel as his name implies. Men like that sink slower than others. Men shall trust you to have a list of the men who float, Tyrion said, and set the cup down because his hand had begun to tremble with weariness, or with something more interesting. Well, the city is not destroyed. It will dine on that fact for months. It will dine on a number of facts, Varys said. The menu is being written even now. Let me guess the first course. Tyrion wiped his mouth with a thumb as if erasing a smile. Triumph. The hand of the king who was hand before arrives and arranges the world to his liking, while red roses pretend to be a kindly garnish. Varys said, which was the sound he made when a truth had been adequately described. Then comes the second course. The boy proclaims his love of his people, and his people are expected to applaud until their hands ache, and our sister will pour the wine for them. Your sister pours well, Varys agreed. He turned his head, listening to a silence Tyrion could not hear. Go down, he added, almost idly. Your father will wish to find you before the city does. Tyrion left Podrick sleeping and took the stairs that cut through the tower like careful stitches. The Red Keep woke in its habitual way, which felt indecent given what the night had done. Servants set to sweeping up small catastrophes as if sweeping could remove history's stains. A page darted past with a tray of bread and olives, as if hunger were a problem that could be solved briskly. In the yard, a stable boy ran his hand along a horse's throat to calm it. The animal's eye rolled, white, offended. The throne room was a stag skull of a place, all bone and empty sound. Tywin Lannister had ridden his horse as far as the steps below the Iron Throne. Bits of the mare's sweat darkened the stone, as if the floor itself perspired under the added weight of significance. Joffrey sat on the throne with his feet not quite finding the ground properly. Cersei stood off to one side like a delicate cup made of a dangerous metal. Pycelle bobbed, dribbling praise like thin soup from a ladle. The Tyrells were a fresh, clean smell in the room. Summer grass where the keep preferred winter dust. Ser Loras wore grief, like a perfectly tailored garment. Beside him, Margaery smiled as one smiles at the idea of a thing, not the thing itself. Tyrion came in at the back and stood where one does who intends neither to hide nor to be noticed. Words occurred in the order he had predicted. Tywin's voice had the exact timbre of necessity. Joffrey's held a boy's effortful grandeur. Cersei drifted among them like a perfume that must be endured, because it is expensive. Loras made his petition. The roses laid at the city's bloody feet with all the right phrases. Joffrey's betrothal to Sansa was suddenly a sacrifice he had always been willing to make. Margaery's hand was suddenly a thing the realm had always deserved. It all happened with such tidy inevitability that one might have mistaken it for justice. Sansa stood as if carved from courtesy. When the words struck her, they were meant to strike. Tyrion watched the shock move through her like a bird through a hedge. It left nothing visibly ruffled. Only the eyes betrayed the passage, going wide for an instant before remembering to be blue and calm. Very well, Joffrey cried, pleased with the sound of his own magnanimity. For love of my people, I set aside the Lady Sansa. Let it be known that. Tyrion left before the ending because endings in that room multiplied like small dogs. In the corridor he nearly ran into Lancel, who had bled through his bandage again and was enduring his own pain as if it were an audience he had not invited. My lady shall be pleased, Lancel said faintly, by way of greeting. Your lady's always pleased by her own decisions, Tyrion said. The rest is music. He turned aside, took a smaller stair, and found himself in a hall that gave onto a narrow walk above one of the keep's lesser courts. Somewhere below, men shouted about a missing cart, and the argument had the rhythm of a song sung out of tune. He stood for a moment to let the morning touch him. The sun slid across his face and found no warmth to make, like a lover returning late to a bed already cooled. He told himself to go to his chambers and sleep. He told himself to go to the kitchens and eat. He told himself many useful things. He sensed the man before he heard him, the way one senses a low wind. Sir Mundon Moore arrived from the shadow with the courtesy of a knife's appearance. His face had been carved with disinterest. The white of his cloak took the light, and then gave it back unkindly. "Sir Mandan," Tyrion said, "come to tell me the king's gratitude runs as deep as a puddle after summer rain." Moore said nothing. He stepped closer, and silence grew close. Tyrion's hand went to the hilt at his side with none of the drama such gestures have in songs. It was a small, embarrassed movement, as if he'd remembered a debt and reached for his purse. Sir Mandan's sword made its own decision. The first cut was a white thought. The second was heat. Tyrion felt his face open along a line he had not known lived there. He saw, very clearly, the bead of blood at the sword's edge gather itself to leap, and then the world lurched sideways. He stumbled against the parapet and saw the court below swing like a bell. He brought his knife up without artistry and felt it glance along mail, ridiculous as a child's toy. Podrick's shout was the sound a boy makes when he discovers the body is capable of saving a life. Tyrion had not heard him behind. The squire came pelting along the walk with a boar spear too large for him. Sir Mandan turned with the slight, irritably careful motion of a man warding off a fly. The spear point bit his backplate and slid. Podrick did not stop. He lowered his shoulder and drove, all awkward mass and stubborn will, and the white cloak found the parapet with the backs of his legs and went over backward in a small offended flail of arms. Tyrion lurched to the rail in time to see Sir Mandan strike the stone lip of a buttress on the way down. The sound was an unmusical note. He hung for an indecent moment by one arm, cloak snagged, and then the weight of the armor and the wetness of the morning agreed with gravity. He fell. By the time his body lay in the court, it was already a story looking for a teller. Podrick had him by the elbow. "Lord," the boy said, his voice the wrong size for his throat. "Lord, you're cut." "Sit. Please." Tyrion sat because sitting was suddenly an accomplishment. The world came and went in curtains. He pressed the heel of his hand to his face, and it came away red. The blood smelled not of iron, but of a sweet, shameful spice. He thought, with a flatness that would have impressed his father, "Someone wishes me to stop being inconvenient." "Help!" Podrick was shouting. "Help!" The hand. "My lord, help!" The boy's panic rang off stone. In a moment there were others. A guard whose expression had the empty competence of men who arrived too late to be blamed. A woman who made a sound of sympathy that managed to be insulting. Varys, of course, with cloth already in his hands. "Hold this," the eunuch said, and set pressure with a softness that made Tyrion's bones ache. "And breathe. Breathing is briefly fashionable. Do try it." "Sir Mandan," Tyrion managed. The word scraped. "Yes," Varys said. His eyes traveled to the court below, and then returned, composed. "The city claims its price in peculiar currencies." "Who?" The blade was very white. Varys murmured. "I never trust a man whose blade is that clean." "Who?" Tyrion insisted, though the question seemed to be pulling him backward down a well. Varys lowered his head a fraction, as if listening for a whisper that came through stone. "No one who will ever confess." They bore Tyrion to his chamber, and the ceiling swam above him. Beams twisting into ship's ribs, and then back again into the sober carpentry of the Red Keep. He heard Pycelle's old man coo. Heard someone make a poultice of something that smelled like a mown field full of mice. Heard Podrick's breathing lurching along like a cart with a bad wheel. He slept. The sleep had edges. He woke into a different world. It had been arranged while he was away. Tywin Lannister was Hand of the King again, in case anyone had forgotten that he always intended to be. The city told itself a fresh, clean story about its survival. In the telling, Tyrion appeared only as a cautionary sentence. A small man who had not done enough and had dared to bleed in public. The pain had settled into his face as into a new house. It experimented with stares. He reached for water and found Shay's hand there before the cup. "You are stubborn," she said. "I am talented," he said, and winced when the words pulled at skin, not yet convinced it was a face again. "What are you doing here?" "Counting," she said. "You are still you. 1. You still have too many enemies. 2. You still want to make jokes when jokes are nails in your mouth. 3. He laughed and then regretted it, which was a good lesson perhaps. "The city is saved." The city is hungry, she said. It is always hungry. It will eat stories until it is full, and then it will be hungry again. How philosophical we are this morning. I learned it from you, Shay said, and set the cup to his lips as if feeding a difficult child. Drink. Your little boy swears he killed a knight. Podrick. Tyrion swallowed. The water tasted of stone, which was suddenly pleasant. He did kill a knight. He killed Sir Mandan Moore, the one in white. She sniffed. They look like wedding doves that forgot they were birds. Some doves peck, Tyrion said. He closed his eyes and saw again the flash of white at the edge of the world, the deliberate absence of expression in the face above it. It appears I am unfashionable again. You were not fashionable yesterday, Shay said primly. Rest. He rested because her hand on his neck told him that was the correct decision. Later, Varys came like a careful breeze. He offered words in the manner of a man offering a tray of little cakes. Sweet enough to please, small enough not to offend. I have informed your father you will receive him when your wound is dressed, Varys said. I did not specify which wound. How dutiful, Tyrion murmured. You always arrange me so nicely on the plate. It is not the plate you should fear, Varys said a little sadly. It is the appetite of the diners. Tywin came at last with the distant jingle of a harness on an animal he had left outside, a sound that seemed to enter the room before him. The hand's face was the map of a country that had long ago stopped allowing itself to be invaded. He stood at the foot of Tyrion's bed and considered the ruin along his son's cheek the way a stonemason considers a crack. Unpleasant, but potentially instructive. So, Tywin said, the word did a great deal of work for being small. You refused to defend the city. I declined to be made a fool of, Tyrion said. Even lying down, he managed to make a bow of it. You were born made, Tywin said. I had hoped time would plane away some of the roughness. He let his gaze travel, assessing the room for the presence of weakness and of witnesses. Finding only one of those, he continued, his voice flat as a ledger. The city stands. It does, Tyrion said. How relieved we are that it waited until you could be seen saving it. The Tyrells were useful, Tywin allowed. From him, it was a fusion. In the future, you will refrain from interfering with my arrangements by making your own. You will also refrain, in future, from being attacked by my king's sworn shields in public corridor. Ah, Tyrion said softly. So it was public. Tywin's mouth made a shape that resembled humor if one had never seen humor. If you had died, I would have been obliged to explain why that was not an accident. It would have been tedious. He turned, already finished with the conversation. You will remain where you are until you are improved. Then you will remove yourself from the Tower of the Hand. I will require the rooms. Of course, Tyrion said. If there is one thing a man loves, it is having his blankets warmed by another. Tywin paused, and when he spoke again, the voice had dropped a note. You think yourself a wit, Tyrion? Perhaps you are. But you mistake the realm for an audience, and men who do that are eaten. Stay quiet. Keep your head. Do not tempt me into teaching you the meaning of mercy. Bender. He left without waiting for a reply. Mercy, in Tywin's mouth, had always sounded like a blade returned to its sheath, only halfway. Podrick came to stand miserably at the door, as if unsure whether entry itself required bravery beyond his supply. Lord. Come, Tyrion said. And the boy came, his movements those of a young hound trying not to knock things over with its enthusiasm. Tell me again. Pod told it simply. He had heard the step. He had seen the white cloak. He had watched the sword. He had pushed because push was what a body could do when thought failed it. At the end of it, his eyes filled, and he stammered, I didn't mean to. If I did wrong, if I shouldn't have. You should have, Tyrion said. You did well. There are men who will bite their own tongues to keep from saying that to the boy who saved them. I am not among them. He touched the cut along his face and felt the future it promised. He will be very hard to drown a second time. Sir Mandan, Podrick whispered, aghast. No, Tyrion said. My sister. He slept again and woke into a day that had put on court clothes. The city paraded its gratitude past the Red Keep, row banners repaired, trumpets oiled, bruises hidden with powder. The stench of the river had been replaced by the more respectable stench of horse and man and pride. Great lords came and were announced properly. Petyr Baelish slid through rooms as if rooms were a liquid, and he had discovered how to breathe it. He smiled as if he had invented teeth. Sansa found her way to the Godswood. It was the one place in the city that still smelled like something she recognized when she closed her eyes. There was a tree there that tried sincerely to be a heart tree and failed, and she appreciated it for the effort. She sat where she could see a strip of sky and said nothing aloud, because the gods in the south liked you to say everything aloud. Petyr came, of course. Sansa did not startle. She was learning to expect that certain men arrived the way cats arrive, when they are not being watched. My lady, he said with a bow that was a little mockery of itself. What a kindness the gods have done you. You mean my betrothal, she said, and was proud of the way the words did not spill. I mean your freedom, he said. Though it is a southern freedom, it comes with a leash. I am still a ward. She said, a hostage, a songbird in a prettier cage. Petyr agreed. But cages have doors, and doors have hinges, and hinges misplace their pins. He smiled. Would you like to go home? There are moments when hope is a sin, and Sansa knew this one. But she allowed it to brush her anyway. Yes, she said, because honesty seems royal when you have been forced to be polite. More than anything. Then you shall, he said, so lightly that the words almost floated away. I have ships and favors, and the way a man puts his hand on a cup tells me everything about his grip on his life. Be good. Smile. We will write you a little road across the sea of all this. He left her with the sense that she had been handed a pretty stone and told it was a key. She turned it in her hands and heard nothing click. That night, the city tried to sleep off its heroics. Fires smoldered like thoughts one wishes to be done with. The Red Keep settled with little tick and crack noises, as if the stones themselves had bones they were easing. The Hound came up the servants' stairs with a bottle in his fist and blood on his knuckles that had not all been earned in that day's work. He smelled of horse and wine and the thing that lives under fire. He found Sansa's chamber by the way all dangerous men do, by moving as if doors should behave around them. Little bird, he said, and the nickname did not sound cruel in his mouth at that hour. Sing me a song. She was very still in the candle's thin light. Sir. Not sir, he said with a laugh that had nothing to do with laughter. No more sir. I told the boy to stuff his crown in his. He did not finish, perhaps because she was looking at him the way one looks at men who have come home from wars they did not choose. Please, she said, because people had been saying it all day, and the word had lost its shame. You may sit. He did not. He stood and swayed a little, as if a wind still pushed at him. I can take you out, he said. I can. There are ways. I know them better than anyone. We go now. We ride now. I'll break any man who tries to. I cannot. She said. And with that honesty, she felt the cage outline in the air. It would doom anyone who helped me, and I must not doom those who help me. He stared at her, the burnt half of his face working like an old wound remembering itself. You talk pretty, he said. You'll be dead of it one day. Will you kill me now? She asked. She did not intend to be brave. She intended only to move the moment somewhere else. He took a step, and the room shrank. He smelled of ashes and something barren. I could, he said. I could do anything to you. That's what men like to think. He put the bottle down as if laying down a weapon that had failed to perform its duty. In? She sang. She chose the mother's hymn because it had never failed to make some kindness stir in someone's face. The hound stood with his head bowed slightly, and for a moment she thought he had fallen asleep upright. When she finished, the sound that left him was not a sob. Men like Sandor Clegane keep sobs somewhere no one can find. It was a breath that had forgotten how to be useful. "Keep your songs," he said roughly. "You'll need them." He took up his bottle again and left as abruptly as he had come. In the corridor he surprised two guards and stared at them until their spines softened. He descended into the night without looking back. By morning, he would be a rumor of a man seen at a gate, of a cloak pale in the dark, of hoofbeats arguing with the cobbles, and then lost. On the river, Davos Seaworth's fingers had turned into claws by the time he found something that would float. The green had burned itself into his sight, so that even when he closed his eyes, he saw thin hands reaching up, pleading, made of color. He swore without sound, and felt the oath go out of him like breath. The plank he found had clung to him as much as he clung to it. He did not know which of his sons were trees standing, or trees felled. He made himself not know. The currents beneath the Blackwater talk among themselves. He listened and then stopped listening, because the river always prefers its own voice to the voices of men. Morning came like forgiveness you do not trust. A hull's shadow fell over him, and he almost let go because it seemed appropriate to do so. Salad Horsan had a smile that existed to be doubted. He leaned over the rail and called, "Onion Man. You float like something that has been left too long in a stew." Davos coughed upriver in grief and did not answer. They dropped a line. He took it. When he lay at last on the deck, he stared at the arranged planks and thought, "I have never loved wood so much." "Your king will make a face," San said lightly, "but he will keep you. Men like him throw away gold and keep their knives." "Ben see. Then I am a good knife," Davos said, and the sound of his voice surprised him. Saladhor shrugged. "You are something that reminds a man he should eat. Come, drink water, spit it out. The sea is bad wine." At Dragonstone, Melisandre stood before her flames and saw them do what flames always do. Move beautifully while revealing nothing, and prompt men and women to do the work of revelation for them. Her eyes half closed. She smiled as if someone had made a promise she intended to collect. "He will come." She told the fire, which had the good manners not to answer aloud. Stannis did come, dour as a winter's noon. He leaned on the map table with his hands spread as if he were forcing the land to bear his weight. The defeat had entered him like a new law of nature. It would not depart. He did not blame the men who had drowned or broken. He did not blame the men who had fled. He blamed the failure of things to obey correctness. "We did not have the city," he said. "We nearly did." "Nearly is the brother of not," Melisandre said. Her voice stroked the truth until it purred. "You see how the false gods burn. You see how the true flame waits. Your destiny did not leave you. It stood aside to let your impatience stumble past." "I am not impatient," Stannis said. And the lie was so small, he did not bother to hide it. She stepped close, the red silk whispering, "Bring me the leeches. Bring me the names. Bring me the air you breathe when you dream of justice, my king. Bring it here to the fire. We will make a door in the world where there has only been a wall." "Ben?" He stared at her with a sort of exhausted contempt men reserve for those who will not abandon their hope. "I will bring you men. I will bring you Davos Seaworth." "Good," she said, and smiled, because she liked knives more than gold too. In the Red Keep, life remembered its preferred shape with indecent speed. The halls learned to rustle again. The kitchens discovered, to their relief, that hunger expresses gratitude more loudly than taste does subtlety. The court put on its face. Tyrion healed the way a city does, by pretending to be better until the pretending was almost true. The cut along his face stiffened into a statement. When at last he could walk without hearing his blood reconsider itself, he limped into the sun and felt the light examine him with clinical interest. Bronn found him with the pleased air of a man who had survived something he had not entirely understood. "There you are," he said. "Your head's still on. Mostly. Enough to drink from, Tyrion said, which is all one requires. News, Bronn said cheerfully. Your father sent men to toss through your papers. Looking for your brain, I suppose. Didn't find it. Found a few jokes. They laughed, then looked sorry. And you? I'm thinking of a raise, Bronn said. Things are dearer in a city that's just been defended. Or refused, as you like to call it. You shall have it, Tyrion said. If I attempt to bargain with you in this state, you will win too easily, and then become bored. True, Bronn allowed. He squinted at the line of Tyrion's scar. Gives you a look? What sort of look? The sort that says you've been kissed by something other men avoid, Bronn said. Some women like that. Some men do too, Varys said, stepping out from behind a pillar with the resourceful timing of a conjurer whose rabbit has made up its own mind about appearances. We must speak, my lord. Must we? Tyrion said. We must, Varys said, lowering his voice just enough to assure anyone listening that there was something to be heard. I have it on good and disreputable authority that Sir Mandon was acting on an instruction not his own. Excellent, Tyrion said. I had feared he had suddenly developed a personality. We cannot prove the provenance of the order, Varys went on. Proof is a tedious business and rarely the lever that moves the world. But we can collect rumors and curate them until they perform the same function. My sister, Tyrion said. It was not a question. Her love for you is complicated, Varys said gently. The king's is simpler. There are other possibilities. Let us say that knives grow in certain gardens more readily than in others. Nah. Then let us stay out of gardens, Tyrion said. He rubbed at his face and felt the new geography. And what of our northern guests? Ah, Varys said. Lord Baelish has volunteered to make a pilgrimage to the Tyrell's abundant fields and return with all sorts of fruits. He has already sown certain seeds in the Lady Sansa's hope, which is fertile, Tyrion said softly. Quite, Varys said. He studied Tyrion's face with a compassion that never looked like pity. You are not the man you were yesterday. I am always that man, Tyrion said. Only more so. Then you will forgive me if I continue to place small, inconvenient truths in your path, Varys said. It keeps you interesting. Do, Tyrion said. He let the eunuch glide away and stood with Bronn watching the courtyard argue about a broken wheel. Buy yourself something sharp, he said, and something dull. Some problems require hammers. Bronn grinned. I have both. Let me know which you need for which of your family. Surprise me, Tyrion said. He walked then, slowly, through streets that had not been streets 2 nights ago but battlefields. And now were markets again, because men do not shop well on battlefields. In Flea Bottom, a woman hawked bowls of stew with the cheerful brutality of survival. King's stew, she cried. King's stew, Queen's price. Tyrion bought a bowl and tasted onions and fish, and the faint, medicinal note of something that had no name, and was all the more respectable for it. A child watched him eat with the earnestness of hunger. He handed over the bowl's remainder and endured the child's inspection of his face with equal earnestness. Does it hurt? The child asked. Because children are spared politeness. Yes, Tyrion said. It is useful to be reminded. He went to the sept and stood under the same cool dome where he had told the gods he was done. He considered telling them he had lied, or that they had lied, or that everyone had been telling the truth at the time and time itself was the liar. Instead, he let the silence come and stand beside him. It smelled of candle smoke and old wood and salt. It smelled, faintly, of rosemary from a scrubbed kitchen somewhere on the far side of the city. And he smiled despite himself because small consistencies comfort men as much as large laws do. When he returned to his chambers, Shay had arranged the room to her liking, which meant it would be more comfortable than it had been. She had a way of making the space forget it was afraid. You look different, she said, and he lifted a hand to the scar, and she shook her head. Not that, heard Autumn. She touched his chest with a finger. I feel the same, he said. You will, she answered. Until you don't. He kissed her, because kissing was a language, in which no one could interrupt him. Afterward, he lay with his eyes open and watched the light move across the wall like a careful animal. He thought of Stannis' certainty, and of Tywin's certainty, and of Cersei's certainty, and of his own lack, which felt suddenly more honest than any of theirs. He thought of Sansa's song, of Podrick's spear, of Bronn's grin, of Varys' folded hands. He thought of a chain that had never risen from the river and of green that had. And he thought, with a clarity that cut, that refusing to be a savior is not the same as escaping the arithmetic of a city that tallies every hand that does not help it, and every hand that does. Days passed that were larger than they looked. Petyr Baelish went and came back with a new smile and news that blossomed like mold wherever it touched. The king would marry Marjorie Tyrell, and the roses would indeed climb the walls of King's Landing, sweetening the sewage with scent. The small folk named the battle first, after one thing, and then another, settling at last on a blare of names that satisfied no one and everyone. Pycelle tottered in and out of relevance. Lancel's wand became a lesson. Hallyne and his guild preened like cats who have discovered that their hairballs are treasures. The Hound became a rumor that took the roads and ran. Tyrion attempted to take stock. He made lists that pleased him by their neatness, and then displeased him by their contents. He visited the kitchens as if food could be persuaded by conversation to be virtue. He sent coin to a woman who had sung outside a burning house to call her children back out of fright. He set a trap for a little man with a big knife, who was thinking of being brave in the wrong direction, and found it pleasing that the trap snapped with a crisp sound that felt like justice in miniature. At last, called, he went to the throne room again, to stand with the other ornaments while decisions were exhibited. Tywin announced taxes with the bored magnificence of a man who has discovered gravity and is gracious enough to share it. Joffrey preened. Cersei glowed. Laura stood like an accusation carved and sanded smooth. Margaery laughed at the right instance and made the light love her. Sansa stood with her hands folded and her mouth composed, and the knowledge in her eyes that cages with curtains are still cages. When it ended, Tyrion was already leaving mentally while his body endured a last bow. He found himself again at the balcony of the tower, because men do return to the places that taught them most clearly what they are. The river moved, indifferent. He pictured the iron chain that had existed only in his mind, the cleverness he had refused to unleash in a city that had no intention of rewarding it. He wondered what shape the night would have taken if he had. He wondered what shape he was taking now. Podrick joined him, his boots careful. Lord, he said, I polished your knife. The one you had in the corridor. Throw it away, Tyrion said. Podrick's eyes went frightened, as if he had been told to drown a dog. But, buy another, Tyrion said. A better one. And remember that sometimes the only useful edge on a blade is the one that persuades a man it exists. Bah. Yes, my lord, Podrick said, as if the phrase itself were a whetstone. Varys arrived without arriving, the way a change in weather arrives. I bring news, he said. Or stories, which are often better. Choose one, Tyrion said. I will believe whichever amuses me least. The first, Stannis gathers his grief into a tighter fist. He is a man who will keep knocking at a door until the door learns to open. The second, Petyr Baelish promises the moon to every man and intends to deliver it to himself. The third, the small folk say a little bird sang the hound to sleep, and that is why the fires did not burn the whole city. Now, Tyrion smiled. We will keep that one. We will, Varys agreed. His eyes went briefly, habitually, toward the holdfast. There is one more. Your father intends to send you from the center to the edge, to be safe. He is a generous gardener when he wishes a plant to have less sun. Where to? Somewhere that can be mistaken for a kindness, Varys said. Further, perhaps, from the queen. Closer, perhaps, to gratitude. Gratitude, Tyrion said. A spice southerners add to their soups to make bitterness more palatable. Ah, Varys said, and smiled with real amusement. You have been eating in the right kitchens. They stood together for a time watching the water make the same argument it always makes about the persistence of things. Tyrion felt the day loosen around him like clothing at evening. He did not feel triumphant. He did not feel beaten. He felt oddly like a man who has found the exact weight of the tools he can carry and knows he will be asked to repair a house that does not belong to him. When dark came, the city did not catch fire. It made supper. It made love. It made small crimes and smaller generosities. A beggar flicked streaks of dried green from a boot and told a child a story about dragons that had never been here. In the Tower of the Hand, Tywin wrote a letter to a man who would pretend to be surprised to receive it. In a cell under Dragonstone, leeches fattened themselves on names. At a window in the Queen's Holdfast, Sansa Stark watched the lights along the river and whispered the North to herself, until the word grew a little fur on it again. Tyrion lay awake with Shay's back warm against his belly and listened to the city breathe. He had refused, and then he had acted, and then he had been punished, which is to say, the day had proceeded as days do here. He put his hand on his face and felt the new shape. "Very well," he told the dark. "If I am to be a different man, I will be one of my own choosing." The dark, being courteous, did not argue. In the morning, he would rise and write a letter that said nothing cleverly, and then another that said too much plainly. And then he would go to the sept and not pray, and to the kitchens and not eat, and to his father and not bow, and to the girl and not promise. He would do all these things with the exactness of a man being measured for a suit of lies he intends to walk in without tripping. And beyond the city, out on the roads where the dust remembers hooves better than it remembers footsteps, the shape of war would keep assembling itself, because men hungry for crowns and men hungry for bread chew the same world down to its bone. The bells began again. They sounded less cracked to him. Perhaps the iron had learned a new note. Perhaps he had. He dressed and put on his scar and went out to greet the day, as if it were a person he intended to cheat lightly and entertain thoroughly. The river turned, unbothered. The city made that low, waking noise of its many-throated life. Tyrion Lannister smiled in the way a man does when he has already accepted his own disappointment and intends to make better use of it than anyone expects.